Yo, how the hell you doing, fight fans? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. My name's Liam. I pick fights on this channel each and every week, except last week when there was no UFC action to break down. Had a great time celebrating Thanksgiving with the family. I hope that you guys all did as well. Peace, love, and chicken grease to all of you guys. God bless. I hope you guys had a wonderful time. But we're back and we have a hell of a fight card to break down. It's UFC Austin. We are back in Texas, baby. I knew we couldn't be at the Apex because I looked at the quality of these fights and I knew that there was something amiss, right? Top 4 fights on the bill. This is a lot higher than average for a UFC fight night card, in my opinion. The rest of the way down kind of looks a lot more like a normal UFC fight card, that you would see in the Apex Center. But still, I just think that we're getting some really well-matched, fun, interesting scraps at the top of this card. So I'm excited to get back into it. I'm excited that we have fights to break down. So if you guys are new here, welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us. If you guys are true to the show, appreciate you guys for being here. A lot of regulars already in the building. Bailey is here. Dixon is here. Andrew in the building says Liam's doing his break falls oaths to get ready for the show. You know that's true. Shout out to Cole as well. Says, what's good, Liam, in chat? December cards already, and we're getting into them in earnest. Let's do it, guys. Beneil Dariush versus Arman Tsarukyan. What a fight in the lightweight division to be main eventing this card. We've got two guys that are really looking to burst forward with a big opportunity. Beneil Dariush was right on the cusp of that title shot against Islam Makhachev, and unfortunately, he takes the fight against Charles Oliveira. He tries to step up and make that really big fight happen, and unfortunately, it didn't go his way. Beneil Dariush has been in a lot of big fights. He's been in a lot of fights with meaningful guys over the years, but unfortunately, he's one of these guys that's kind of languished a little bit, and now he's starting to get towards that latter end of his prime, and he's really got to move or the time is going to pass him by, unfortunately. And so you look at Beneil Dariush, 22-5-1 as a professional, an elite record, his grappling, his scrambles, elite, right? I think most of the time we see that Beneil Dariush is incredible. He even took down Charles Oliveira in that fight. But when you look at the real concern for me, is that I thought Beneil looked winded against Charles Oliveira in that first round. I'll have to go back and rewatch the footage and see exactly what went wrong. I know he took some big knees to the body. And when you look at Charles Oliveira historically, he's a guy that really saps the energy from his opponents. A lot of guys that tend to have good gas tanks slow down badly against Charles Oliveira because of the pace at which he forces you to scramble, because of the threats from his back in jiu-jitsu. You never feel comfortable establishing position on top. And honestly, Benny was getting reckless with his ground and pound. He was like throwing hammers that were hitting the mat. If you guys remember that fight, one of the standout visuals in my mind is just Beneil Dariush throwing his hands so hard and missing Charles Oliveira with a number of ground and pound shots. And I think that, that's just a sign of him not having the comfortability on top. Now, let's talk about the other side of this fight for a second as well, which is Arman Tsarukyan. This is a guy who is a little bit younger in his UFC career. Certainly 7-2 in the UFC for Arman Tsarukyan, 20-3 overall as a professional. So a lot of experience for Arman. And his only loss, in the UFC that people can cleanly agree on, right? We'll talk about is the Islam Makhachev fight. And Islam's the current champion. So obviously you can sell a rematch narrative there. When Arman made his UFC debut, it's against Islam Makhachev. It's on short notice, and he provided a very good challenge. Now, the other loss in the UFC was to Mateusz Gamrot, and I thought that was a debatable fight. I thought that I certainly leaned Arman Tsarukyan getting the nod there, but I didn't think it was out of the question. I didn't think that Arman necessarily showed the best 5-round game plan against Gamrot in that spot. So what is the commonality between those two guys? I think that they have really good grappling. Mateusz Gamrot, elite level grappling, ADCC level grappling. Islam Makhachev, we've seen what he's done to the likes of, Charles Oliveira on the mat. So we know that Islam Makhachev is an elite level ground player on the mat at 155 pounds. So those are the guys that have given him trouble. But you also look and Olivier Aubin-Mercier, who just won, $2 million in the PFL. He beat him via unanimous decision. A great grappler, a very well-practiced wrestler. Davi Ramos, another ADCC level grappler. He got the win in that fight. Matt Frivola, he systemically out-wrestled him there. And Matt Frivola showed in the Benoit Saint-Denis fight, he can compete in the grappling. He can compete in the wrestling scrambles. It was a big head kick that closed the show there for Benoit Saint-Denis. But in any case, Christos Yagos, I kind of thought that was a layup spot for Arman. I bet on him big in that fight. And the Joel Alvarez fight, I also bet on him big there because Joel Alvarez is a guy who's very tall, long, and I just felt like he was going to have a hard time avoiding the takedowns of Arman. And Arman on the ground is a really savvy operator. So for me, the question of this fight, does come down to Arman. How does he approach the fight? And is he able to get takedowns? Beneil Dariush is a very difficult guy to take down at times. And we have seen Arman cracked on the feet. Let's not forget, Joaquim Silva did rock, very badly Arman Tsarukyan in his last fight. So that's something that I do want to, always keep in mind is the chin could get checked there. But I think that when I'm looking at a fight like this, I'm looking at a guy in Beneil Dariush who's probably at the tail end of his prime. And he's coming off a really devastating finish loss. And they're giving a guy with some momentum, with a couple wins in a row in the division, who should have a skill set to match pretty well with Beneil Dariush, an opportunity to kind of get that step up and move forward with his career. So I'm going to have to lean with Arman Tsarukyan here, offhand. And the reason being, he's the younger guy in this spot. And I think that it's going to be difficult for Beneil to establish takedowns. I think the striking could be close and competitive, but I haven't liked what I've seen from Beneil's cardio, especially in recent performances. And Beneil always has lived on the edge, guys. If you look throughout his career, let's go fight by fight for Beneil Dariush here, because frankly, there's been a couple of mind-boggling results for a guy who's a great fighter with great wins. The Mateusz Gamrot fight I thought was really close, but he won in the critical moments that mattered, and then he dropped Gamrot, hit him with those huge shots. So he definitely did more damage. He deserved to win that fight. But I just think that, that was a really close fight that then Beneil, won it clearly with those big knockdowns, with those big moments. You look at the Tony Ferguson fight. I mean, Tony Ferguson hasn't won a fight in years. He's been having a really tough time. So it's no disrespect to Tony, but that just seems like a fight where Beneil was favored to win. I think he was like minus 170, minus 180 going into that spot, and he was able to get the job done. But, Tony hasn't really looked like himself lately, and, not getting the finish there is something to ask about when, Bobby King Green is getting his first submission, So then you look at the Carlos Diego Ferreira fight, close fight. But again, he was able to out scramble him, out savvy him, close 15-minute affair. And Carlos Diego Ferreira is another elder statesman in the division. Scott Holtzman, a little bit older guy in the division. Drakkar Klose, I believe he's fighting on either this card or another upcoming card. And, Drakkar had him on the ropes in that fight. He landed big shots. He hurt Beneil Dariush, a good fighter, but a guy who puts his shit on the line and who's not afraid to be in some reckless exchanges at times. So I do think that Beneil has a chance to crack and hurt Arman Tsarukyan, but I think that Arman Tsarukyan probably just has more paths. I like his kicking game. He's got very good spin kicks. He's got an interesting arsenal of attacks. When you watch his striking, he's not the best striker in the division by any means, but he is a very difficult guy to deal with. He has good fundamental boxing and kicks, as in my opinion. So I just think that, he probably is going to have the youth to carry him in this spot. Now let's pull up bestfightodds.com because, guys, I do not look at the odds before I do this show as best I can. Arman Tsarukyan sitting at about a minus 250 favorite. So, yeah, I don't feel compelled to jump there, on that price because I got let's go back and look at my past bets on these fighters because I believe that I've gotten the same price for him to go against guys that I know are going to be on their back in the first, exchange. That's just a different situation than Beneil Dariush, who is a pretty difficult guy to take down in the early going. And he's very savvy in his scrambles as well, So I'm looking right here. And guys, here's what's funny. My betting results couldn't be more opposite on these two fighters. When I have bet against Beneil Dariush, it has not gone my way. I bet Mateusz Gamrot against Beneil Dariush. And like I said, hats off to him. He deserved the win that night. And I bet Carlos Diego Ferreira lost a split decision there to Beneil Dariush. So again, just haven't had the best read fading Beneil Dariush. So that makes me not want to go, aggressively lay a minus 250 price. Now, with that being said, on the Arman Tsarukyan side, I had 5 units on him when he fought Joel Alvarez at minus 200, and I thought that was a great price. I thought in hindsight, it looked like a great price. But I did bet Damir Ismagulov 1 unit at plus 180 against Arman Tsarukyan. So I don't think that he is impervious. I did think Damir was going to offer better resistance. And we've seen Damir has kind of, checked out a little bit. I believe he's retired from competition once again. So, we wish him the best in his health, but I just don't know that was the best version of Damir. And unfortunately, I bet into that. But in any case, I also had Arman Tsarukyan 10 units parlayed up against Christos Giagos. I just thought that, like I said, that was a free square in my opinion. And I had, the ITD plus 175 against Joel Alvarez. So I would be curious to know what the ITD is for Arman Tsarukyan in a fight like this, because Beneil Dariush does have a history of getting knocked out, unfortunately. It's reared its ugly head a few times. 5 wins by knockout, 4 losses by knockout for Beneil Dariush. So elite level ground operator, but Michael Chiesa once submitted him as well. It's not like he's completely above reproach on the ground game. Charles Oliveira was able to get back up from the bottom and then ground and pound him to a TKO. We saw Alexander Hernandez ground and pound, land the big shots and finish Beneil Dariush. Edson Barbosa knocked out Beneil Dariush. So Ramsey Nijum all the way back in 2014. So Beneil, great fighter, fun fighter, scrapper, but he went from, a very difficult fight that he lost in brutal fashion to another really difficult fight with a young hammer who's hungry, who wants to be there, who's improving all the time. I just feel like this is not a good spot for Beneil. But again, the price would tempt you at the plus 200 because you're getting a great fighter at a big price. But I just don't know that I'm compelled to play the underdog either. I think that there's a chance that Beneil just could be a little bit cooked. He's a little bit older in this division and he's been through a lot of wars. And I just think Arman might be the younger, fresher guy who's ready to take that spot. But we'll find out. I've been waiting for some turnover in the lightweight division. It's been hard to come by. We'll see if it comes around on Saturday. I'm expecting it. Next up, we've got Jalin, the Tarantula Turner, taking on Bobby King Green. And this is a fascinating fight. From what I was hearing through the Twitter streets, there's some beef maybe between these two guys, some gym wars. These guys like to get down, and Jalin Turner, very big guy to be stepping up, for a lightweight fight, 155 pounds. I believe his last weigh-in, he missed weight. Let me just confirm this. I don't want to speak out of turn here. But yeah, last time out, missed weight against Dan Hooker and then also lost the split decision there. And granted, I thought that there was a pretty good case that Jalin Turner won that fight the night of. I'd have to rewatch it. Dan Hooker fought like an absolute savage. He is a guy who's willing to take damage and keep coming forward. So more power to him. When you look at Bobby King Green, I've always touted him as an underrated fighter, as a very good fighter. But I hadn't cashed in on these last couple opportunities. I kind of thought Bobby was a little past it. I let that Drew Dober loss get to me. I thought he was better than Drew Dober. That was my view on it. I had watched all the tape and I thought he was tuning up Drew Dober and then got knocked out brutally. So after the Islam result, after the Drew Dober result, I was kind of just thinking, maybe Bobby Green is done. And then the Jerry Gordon fight, I kind of thought Jerry Gordon was outboxing him a little bit. And then all of a sudden, one thing led to another, right? The clash of heads, the stoppage of the fight, no contest there. But then he bounces back with the submission win over Tony Ferguson. And again, we talked about Tony a little bit earlier in this breakdown. What do we make of a Tony Ferguson win in the year 2023? I don't know. The submission, a lot of guys struggled to get it, right? They went for those limb submissions. I always say there's no being a tough guy about a choke. That is something that I fundamentally believe, go for the choke. You know, there's a lot of tough people in fight sports. They're going to let something break. They're going to let something twist, that and the other. But most people, you can't tough guy a choke. You just go to sleep like everybody else. And then Grant Dawson. I thought Grant Dawson was going to win that fight. You know, he's minus 400 favorite. And so, yeah, I guess I agreed with a lot of other people. I didn't bet on Grant Dawson in the spot, but I thought that Grant Dawson ITD, or the fight not to go the distance, was kind of the look there. I thought he was going to eventually wear out Bobby from those ground positions. I mean, the fight was over before it started, right? Grant Dawson, a little bit stiff and awkward, kind of just came across with his striking and didn't have much to offer. Bobby Green, a guy who's not historically known for huge power, caught him clean, caught him cold, and finished the job there in the early going. But you look historically, he absolutely took Nasrat Haqparast to school, you know, so he's beaten up on young guys before. That's not been a problem for him. Rafael Fiziev, by round 3, was taking some big shots from Bobby Green. Shout out to my guy VB in the comments. Very, very sharp individual, said Bobby last fight plus 450 was crazy. I fair play there. Has to be one of the bets of the year, considering Dawson's cardio and chin. Easy money. Cheers to that, my brother. Cheers to that. I did not take it, but yeah, I think that anybody who did take it, that was an absolute great one. Dixon says, Liam, please listen to Jalen's interview with Rampage Jackson. Says a lot about his mentality for this fight. He's basically here for a paycheck. Interesting. I'm definitely tempted to hear what that is. Now, guys, if you notice, I did post my results for Jalin Turner historically on Twitter, and this is not a guy I've bet on at Big Chalk throughout his career. I took advantage of some opportunities when I thought Jalin Turner was undervalued. I mean, guys, he's massive, right? He's fighting Brad Riddell. You know, you're giving me this guy who's a kickboxing archetype, who's half his size, against the guy who I thought was going to soundly out grapple him if they decided to grapple. And that's exactly what we did, right? We cashed that ticket. That was pretty easy. And against Uros Medic, I thought Jalin Turner was just going to outlast him in cardio. You know, I just faded Uros Medic last weekend with Orolbai. Great job from him, you know, doing his damn thing. And we called the sub 1 or 2 via rear naked choke. And the reason I thought so is because we've seen kind of the story with Uros Medic. He's very uncomfortable on the ground. He's not used to being there. And if you put him there, he's going to make some mistakes. And Jalin Turner was able to clean him up in the first round as a result of that. But again, Bobby King Green, let's talk about when he's been submitted in his career, because he's 9-2 career to the submission, and he did not get submitted by Makhachev. He just got bullied. You know, he got kind of big brother bully beat down in that spot, and he got caught on a counter by Drew Dober. But historically, he's not an easy guy to finish or put away. He went to decision with Thiago Moises, Alan Patrick, Lando Venata, Clay Guida, Francisco Trinaldo, Drakkar Klose, Eric Koch, Lando Venata again, Rashid Magomedov, and they both got hurt badly in that draw. And then Dustin Poirier was the last man to finish him with strikes. You look, he hasn't been submitted since, oh my goodness, David Mitchell, toe hold, 2009. Yeah, I think that it'd be very difficult for Jalin to submit Bobby if he's sober. That's what I'd say, right? If Bobby gets hit with a shot and he's wobbling around, then of course, Jalin, the tarantula, he's got a great front headlock series. I do like how he finishes with the guillotine. He's got the length for it, right? He can kind of feed that wrist through and then just pin it to his own, you know, pec, and then finish the choke with downward pressure. He doesn't need 2 hands. You look at a guy like Luke Rockhold, another guy who used a similar archetype to finish Michael Bisping, right? The one-arm guillotine. When you have length and you have posture and somebody's hurt, it's one of the easier chokes to finish and to really put somebody in a position of going to sleep. So I think that for Jalin Turner, here's my big concern, right? Because he's a guy I was very high on historically. But number one, you're coming in off a missing weight. You're doing the short notice bit. So you're potentially going to miss weight again. You're coming off of 2 losses now. And this is the guy that went from, you know, being right at the top potentially of the division, you know, due for a step up, to now he's kind of working his way back down and giving another guy a big opportunity here. And I think that Bobby Green is a guy that is very seasoned. He's very savvy, and he could beat a lot of guys in this division. So, you know, I pop over to the odds screen, and, you know, Bobby Green at plus 205, I just don't know that Jalin Turner has as many paths to looking minus 250 as Arman Tsarukyan, right? Like, does he just easily out wrestle Bobby Green? Not a lot of guys have done that. Clay Guida, I think, went two takedowns to 3 for Bobby Green, right? Like, Bobby Green will go wrestling with you if that's what you want to do. And on the feet, I think Jalin probably has an advantage for maybe the first round when he's fresh, but I just think that Bobby Green is going to have more to sustain. So unless Bobby gets knocked out here, which is possible, then I think Bobby could come on strong in a fight like this. So this is a really tricky spot for me. I got to pull up the intangibles here. We've got a 37-year-old in Bobby Green, and he is coming off of 2 wins. So you could say he could be overvalued coming into a spot like this. Guys tend to be overvalued coming in off a knockout win, and maybe Jalin Turner could be undervalued here coming off of 2 straight losses. But for me, it's the things that Dixon was pointing out. It's the stuff outside the cage. It's maybe the lack of focus. I believe Jalin Turner was training at Ruka Gym. Let me pop over to his Instagram, guys. And this is the other thing. After my research, I'll have a very clear idea of where I'm at. But I'm coming to you guys with my first look. And if you guys are new here, my first look could change over the course of the week. I do research in great depth, but I'm just giving you guys how I feel about it from my initial impression. And my initial impression is Jalin Turner could have won the Gamrot fight and kind of just gave it away. I felt like he could have won the Dan Hooker fight and made it a lot closer than it needed to be. These are things that I'm a little worried about. The cardio is something I'm a little bit worried about. So for me, when I'm looking at a co-main event spot here, could be a big pressure spot. Jalin Turner coming in. Let me see what his training situation looks like. Yeah, it looks like he's skateboarding and having fun, um, doing his thing. I'm not sure how many training partners he has right now. So these are a couple of things I'm going to look into more. Shout out to my guy VB here in the comments. Says first look, Jalin on short notice at minus 250 seems nuts. His cardio looked horrible last fight. My brother, I'm right there with you. Bobby got the gas tank. They size up well. Interesting. And Mark says, man, Jalin 0-4 in decisions. Bobby only been finished 5 times in 50 fights. I'm tending to agree with the chat here. So good stuff, guys. I think that we're all kind of on the same page here, which is just Jalin Turner, solid fighter, good skill set, but hasn't been showing it lately. And, it's a very presumptuous price against a seasoned veteran in Bobby Green. Next up, guys, let's talk about. Oh my goodness. This is what I'm saying. When I looked at the quality of these top 4 fights, it really jumped off the page. We've got former UFC champion Deiveson Figueiredo taking on top contender in the bantamweight division, Rob Font. This should be an absolute banger. Swig of coffee to the chat, and we're going to keep it rolling. Now, guys, we've got 2 bantamweights here, and Deiveson Figueiredo, 35 years of age, making that move up to bantamweight. And he's talked about it for a long time. He's a flyweight, but he's a guy who's always talked about, hey, I want to make that move up. I can make the move up to bantamweight. I can knock these guys. And, Rob Font is a big guy at bantamweight. One thing the UFC likes to do, I feel, when somebody moves up in weight is they like to give you a really big version of the weight class up to see if you're really about it. Think of Chris Weidman taking on Dominic Reyes, right? That's kind of how I feel about it, right? They move him up and they're like, all right, you want to go to 205, like take on the guy who at the time is one of the top guys that's coming up. And that just didn't work out for him, right? So obviously, Rob Font, 36 years of age, he's no spring chicken, but he's a guy that's a little bit, later to the mixed martial arts game. Right. And he was delivering pizzas, whatever. He's kind of got that cool story behind him. But I think what's interesting about Rob Font is he maybe doesn't have the same wear and tear that somebody that did a lifetime of, wrestling or these other martial arts has. So Rob Font's still very dedicated to the game. He's still a guy that puts in a lot of hard work and training. And I think that after his last couple fights, he's got a lot that he still wants to prove. He was basically scheduled to headline in Boston and get this big opportunity, get his marquee fight in Boston. And then he steps up for the UFC, does him a huge favor, takes on, Corey Sandhagen, short notice, and it just didn't work out for him, right? I had the ends by sub. I had Sandhagen sub 5, and Sandhagen's got the doors fully locked in, couldn't finish it. I could not believe it. But in any case, you look at this guy, Rob Font, and he's very resilient. One thing that stands out about him, look at his losses via unanimous decision. This guy will take an absolute beating to make it to the cards. He will throw all night. Let's pull up UFC stats. And I'm not normally a stats guy, but Rob Font, I know that from the past, his stats used to jump off the page. 5.71 strikes landed per minute, 3.7 strikes absorbed per minute. If Rob Font didn't get knocked down, he'd win every fight, right? Like, the guy just goes out there and is landing the jab. He's very potent with that. And I thought that against Adrian Yanez, I was like, you know what? You got a guy who's throwing cuffing hooks, who's going to box him up, and who's going to land these big shots. And I thought that Yanez was landing good shots. He got so confident that he just got banged out of there, right? He just got walloped. And you look at the power of Rob Font, it has translated over time. Not in every fight, not in every exchange, but he does land and disfigure guys. He kind of messed up the face of Jose Aldo very significantly. And, Marlon Vera, again, he's a guy who's insanely durable historically, like one of the most durable guys in the history of the UFC by the metrics, like just takes shots and doesn't go down and doesn't get, finished. But you look at that fight, most men would get finished from the output that he was absorbing there. And it just wasn't the case. So I look at this fight and I think to myself, I have a few questions, which is, does the move up help Figueiredo's cardio? Or does he just become, a much more average guy? Because he cut a lot of weight to be a big guy, strong, physical, huge power for the division, unnatural power for the division. And, I don't think that that's necessarily going to be there at bantamweight in the same way that, oh my God, that same staggering power. I think he's going to have fine power, but he's going to have to rely a lot more on speed, getting to the body, landing big shots. And I think Rob Font can be vulnerable to getting hurt. So for me, I'm almost interested in this fight not to go the distance. I think that Rob Font, if this fight was to go the distance, is probably the favorite. And when I'm looking at it, Rob Font is favored. So, gut level, that makes sense to me. Just when you look at what Rob Font has from a functional skill set, he has not been knocked out, though he's been on the verge, right? He was once submitted by the best guillotiner, maybe in the history of bantamweight, definitely right up there in Pedro Munoz, lights out guillotine from Pedro Munoz, the executioner. So I think that the young Punisher, when you look at Pedro Munoz, he was able to stagger him on the feet and then force Rob Font to wrestle into that front headlock series. I think that's a great path for Figgy here. In terms of how he should try and win this fight, he should try and force Rob Font into a bad wrestling exchange and then guillotine him. Because I think that is where Rob Font has been historically susceptible, right? Why did I bet that fight ends by sub and Sandhagen sub 5? I just thought that short notice, like basically moving your camp up early, 5-round fight against a guy like Sandhagen who comes in great shape from elevation in Colorado. I was like, eventually Sandhagen's going to get that front headlock series. But we've seen Rob Font has made significant improvements on the mat. Shout out to the New England Cartel and those guys. They've definitely worked on their ground game. The Calvin Caters of the division, the Rob Fonts, they've worked on their ground game. They've been working with those Renzo Gracie guys up in the local area, as well as guys within the team, the Nick Fiores. I think that they've been trying to steadily improve their defensive grappling. I think if they had better offensive grappling to boot, maybe that would be something that they could try and work into their fights as well. But you look at going from fighting Song Yadong, who is an absolute terminator, in terms of scheduled bout, to fighting Deiveson Figueiredo. I think from a speculative standpoint, Deiveson could be a great bantamweight, but at 35 years of age, making a change in weight class, there's just a lot of questions that I would want to see answered by Figgy before I'm ready to certify, like, this is the time that he's ready to go right now. So I do think Andrew makes a good point here. Rob insta-tapped fast against Munoz. He definitely improved his grappling defense. I completely agree. He's a very tough guy. He really wants to win. You could see it in how he fights. Rob Font does not want to say, quit. So I think that that's something that is really impressive about him. But in any case, skills do win fights. And I think that the better ground operator is Deiveson Figueiredo, in terms of his skills. But size matters in these grappling exchanges. And I'm just not sure that Figgy's going to have that same grappling dominance. And a lot of guys made pivotal mistakes against Figgy that cost them big. And when they didn't do that, they were able to compete with him and sometimes, outlast him in the cardio department. And maybe without the weight cut, his cardio improves. But again, that's speculation. Whereas sometimes when you go up and you're going with these bigger guys, it could tax you as well. If a big guy is laying weight on you against the fence, hitting you to the body, throwing a bunch of big jabs at you, that could tax your cardio, just like cutting weight can. So fighting is a game of trade-offs. And I think that fighting a guy like Rob Font, he's a big bantamweight, and he's going to make you answer a lot of questions about where your striking's at, about where your durability's at, and about where your cardio's at. So should be a great fight. Speaking of great fights, rounding out the 4-fight, main course here for this event, we've got Sean Brady, grit and guillotines, baby, the Irish way. He's back in the building, taking on Kelvin Gastelum. This should be a hell of a fight. Speaking of guys that may not make weight for this card, Kelvin Gastelum, oh boy. This is a guy who probably should have been a welterweight his whole career. I am now pulling up his Instagram, guys, to see if I believe that he will make the weight. He does look very small in the legs from what I'm seeing. And he's training with Figgy. Interesting. Okay. So the Fight Ready boys, they're trying to come up with something here. And I'll tell you what, I like Fight Ready as a gym. They got Uncle Henry Cejudo in the gym with them as well. So it definitely seems like he's been putting in the time, he's been putting in the work. He's trying to get better here. And listen, I gotta be honest, Sean Brady, let me down last time out against Belal Muhammad. And Belal Muhammad has been a career, overachiever in terms of his odds relative to his expectations. The guy just overperforms and he does a great job. Much better than people expect him to do. So shout out to Belal. But in any case, Belal, his time will come. I hope he gets the Shavkat Rakhmonov fight next. But in any case, we've got, a guy in Sean Brady who has looked vulnerable at times on the feet. Okay. He's got 3 wins by KO or TKO, 1 loss via KO. And that was his last fight against Belal, standing TKO. He basically just looked like he had, gotten overwhelmed, right? Bilal's laying on the volume, throwing more shots than he could take. He's covering up. He's moving. He's trying to get back in the fight. And it just wasn't going his way. And the referee intervenes there. So I felt like that was not a great look. And I thought that the striking against Michael Chiesa also left a lot to be desired. That being said, when you look at the guys grappling, able to submit a black belt in Jake Matthews pretty, clinically in that fight, 3rd round arm triangle choke, able to dominate somebody like Court McGee, strong guy physically, just able to move him around. And I think that his finishing chops could definitely use some work. But when he's able to take people down and control them and set up his office on top, he's able to do a great job. The question is, what does Kelvin Gastelum look like at welterweight? This is a guy who's had canceled bouts with, now I'm talking about Sean Brady, canceled bouts with Michel Pereira and Jack Della Maddalena. And he had an infection, I believe that was like life-threatening or something that was super scary, if I remember the article. And then he had a groin injury. I believe he broke his nose in the Belal fight. So I think he got surgery on that. Like, there's just been a lot of things on the Sean Brady side that have been like a little red flaggy to me. But on the other side, you've got Kelvin Gastelum, who's now 32 years of age and 12-8 in the UFC, a historic career underachiever. And he's coming in here, and a lot of people expect him to get the job done. Looking at the Tapology votes, 58%, of the Tapology voters are rolling with Kelvin to get the job done this weekend. And let's pull up best fight odds and see what the betting odds have to say. Sean Brady, just a slight favorite here, minus 128 on FanDuel Sportsbook, plus 120 the comeback on BetMGM, according to best fight odds here. So you're looking at basically, a very closely lined fight. And I think that Sean Brady has the grappling upside in this fight. I think that he is the much better grappler between these two. I think that we've seen at times in the past, Kelvin Gastelum's grappling has been almost like comically underdeveloped. You look at that Jack Hermanson fight. I mean, the way he got heel hooked there, guys, not high level. It just was not very high level. I'm not taking anything away from Jack. Jack did everything right in terms of going for the offense. I just mean the reaction time, the thought process from Kelvin. None of it looked very high level. It looked like a guy who didn't train many leg locks in the gym, and that's an indictment. You gotta know the elements of the game, right? We train in Renzo Gracie Warwick, white belts train leg locks, right? It's like everybody has to know at least the defense to try and be safe, and it's not to say anybody's going and just cranking a heel hook on somebody on their first day. The whole point is about keeping people safe and making sure if somebody puts themselves in danger, you let go and you educate. And that's the way people don't get hurt. But I felt like Kelvin almost hurt himself in some of these exchanges, not knowing what to do. So that was a huge concern for me. Guys, he's like the only person to lose to Darren Till in the last 10 years. I'm kidding, but you know what I'm saying? Andrew, I don't wipe out or I don't leg lock anybody, brother. It's all love from me. I'm going for chokes. You never hurt anybody with a choke. Worst that happens, they go to sleep, they get a nice nap, wake back up. Oh, hey, how you doing? Shake hands, everything's cool. So that's the way I feel, brother. I don't leg lock anybody, but exiting the system, that's the way I roll, brother. In any case, we have Kelvin Gastelum losing to Chris Weidman via submission. And Chris Weidman, elite grappler, make no mistake, very good grappling chops. All that's true. But let's go look. Chris Weidman has beaten Kelvin Gastelum and Omari Akhmedov since 2015. Okay, so like I used to joke sometimes that he's the best win on everybody's resume. It's like Kelvin Gastelum knocked out Michael Bisping when he retired, but other than that, he's really struggled to put together great wins over the course of his career. The unanimous decision over Chris Curtis, I think, was pretty contentious. I think a lot of people, necessarily didn't agree with that decision, but he gets the nod there. Fair play to him. You look at the Jared Cannonier fight. I thought he pretty cleanly lost that. Robert Whitaker, thought he definitely cleanly lost that. And he got knocked down in the Jared Cannonier fight, if my memory serves. Against Ian Heinisch, got the win there. I don't think Ian Heinisch is employed with the company any longer. Jack Hermanson heel hooks him in the first round, 1 minute in. Darren Till, split decision loss for Gastelum, where he basically did nothing. And Darren Till, former welterweight, by the way. Israel Adesanya. That was the fight that kind of changed the trajectory of his career, and you look at that fight and he gave everything. He went out there and put on an absolute war with a much bigger guy. And he gave everything in that spot, but they let him survive to the to the decision there, if my memory serves. Yep. And he got dropped multiple times there in that fifth round. And I just don't know that we've necessarily seen that same dog, that same hunger at times from him, that willingness to bite down and look for the knockout and find the kill. And maybe he recaptures that, drop into this weight class and doing things the right way. But I don't know. It's kind of a believe it when you see it for me. I think that Kelvin's a guy who I want to root for, just as like a long-term fan of the sport. He's been around a long time. He did the tough season with John Jones and Chael Sonnen. Just he's been a fixture in the sport, right? You like to see good things happen to guys like that. But I also just think, he's dropped the ball a lot of times throughout his career. And so I don't want to fall in love with the story and the narrative. And then a guy who's just young, hungry, needs to get back on track. Obviously, Sean Brady only 1 year younger than Kelvin Gastelum, but I mean young in fight years, right? You look at Sean Brady, and he hasn't had a bunch of wars. He hasn't been knocked out many times. He hasn't been on some of these bigger stages. So it's a step up for Sean Brady. And, in some ways you would think, maybe he should be the dog. But then you look at the fact Kelvin Gastelum hasn't made this weight in a very long time. No evidence to suggest that he's going to make this weight. So when we'll believe it when we see it for sure. And shout out to Dixon says, credit to Cejudo for turning Kelvin's career around. I agree. Moving him out to fight ready. It's a great gym. I think they're going to try and get him prepared and do the right things. But, Marquez MMA for a long time was undefeated in the UFC as well. Renzo Gracie, Philly, and them boys know how to get down. So a lot of good, gyms in Philly, a lot of good guys that are getting work with Sean Brady, and a lot of good preparation, I would think, that has gone into this fight to try and get back on track for a guy who was, making the right steps in his career and then kind of got derailed a little bit. So let's see if Sean Brady could get back on track here. Can't go against my guy, Grit and Guillotines. That's the Irish way, baby. Grit and Guillotines. That is a great skill set. And I think that Kelvin, he's going to bring the fire. He's going to bring some hell. And I'm not looking to lay the chalk against him, especially if he makes the weight, right? But if he misses the weight, if he looks like he's half-hearted on this and he goes back, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to be going back up to middleweight, then I'm just not going to, I'm not going to invest early and get burned on this fight. You know what I'm saying? I'm happy to sit back and watch it. I do think there are real red flags on the Sean Brady side. I tried to lay those out as well. And those are all just from memory. I'm going to do my deep research and then I'll tell you specifically line by line exactly what happened. But just from memory, there's been a couple of things that I saw from the Sean Brady camp that I want to make sure they're all straightened out and ready to go 100% before he's getting back in the cage. Next up, we've got rounding out the main card. One of these things is not like the other. Punahele Soriano taking on Dustin Stolzfus at middleweight. These are two guys, that are really desperate for a win right now in their career. 1-3 over his last 4 fights for Punahele Soriano. I'm not sure a lot of us expected that when he first got to the organization. Seemed very promising. On the other side of things, 1-4 over his last 5 for Dustin Stolzfus. You have to think whoever loses this fight is out of the organization. So it's a big pressure spot, right? Win or go home. And you look at Dustin Stolzfus, and frankly, there's not much to write home about. He gets the win over Joe Pyfer via slam arm injury. There's nothing you could take away from him there. He got the win, but again, if Pyfer's arm hadn't broken, how do we think that fight plays out? I think in a rerun, Pyfer is significantly favored. So I think that you look at Kyle Daukaus, losing the decision there, no problem. Daukaus no longer with the organization. Adolfo Vieira submits him. It was a beautiful move by Adolfo. He kept it competitive, but again, Adolfo, a guy who is a developing talent, was able to submit him, finish him. Same thing happens against Gerald Meerschaert, a guy who's a little bit of a journeyman, a great fighter, fun fighter, scrapper, but a little bit of a journeyman, longer in the tooth, was able to submit him there as well. So that kind of shows me pretty low ceiling overall. 3 losses in a row. Surprised they kept him. They give him Dwight the Body Snatcher Grant. I believe, let me just check. Yeah, that was a New York card. So they put him on a New York card, and Dwight Grant, I believe, is from New York. So, they give him a shot there. He gets to win over Dwight Grant. Dwight Grant, I believe, was 37, on his way out of the sport. So again, Dustin Stolzfus, shout out to him. He gets the win. Then he gets no favors, Dustin Stolzfus. That should be his new nickname, right? Because he doesn't have a nickname. No favors, Dustin Stolzfus. Goes out there against Abus Magomedov, gets front kick to the face, and then Abus is in, main events and co-main events and stuff. So let's see. City Travel says Strickland roasting Stolzfus for being a can is all of the research I need on that fight. I love it, my brother. I feel what you're saying there. And we're looking back here at Punahele Soriano. And Puna is a guy who, let's look at the specific losses. I mean, losing to Brendan Allen, look at where Brendan Allen's at in the division. I think we just take that one and say, hey, Puna, tough breaks, my man. You got body kicked a million times. You look tough as all get out, but you just didn't have anything to offer a more sophisticated striker on the night. You knocked out Dusko Totorovic. You knocked out Oscar Pereira. You beat Jamie Pickett via decision. It was easily beating up Jamie Pickett and then just started to out wrestle him when he got tired. Beat Joe Hoven, Patty. So definitely has some UFC level wins. Knocks out Dr. Luke Gambula. Got the win there as well. But his cardio has been a little bit suspect. Nick Maximov, was able to just outwork him, out wrestle him, grab a hold of him, push him up against the fence, just make it a dirty, ugly fight. And I honestly thought Puna could have won that fight as well, but Maximov just humped his leg, did exactly enough, and got the win. So shout out to him. Take the credit to him. But I really just didn't think that he showed that he was a much better fighter than Puna. It was just a terrible fight. In any case, Puna also hurt his leg in that fight, I believe. So he hurts his leg. He comes back against Dalche. He looks great. And Roman Kopylov, guys, was a horrible matchup for him. In hindsight, Roman, he's just too dangerous, right? He wasn't going to get taken down. He wasn't going to get tired. And he was going to beat him up on the feet. So it's like, man, that's just a tough matchup, right? And Puna is a guy that has some power on the feet. He could be live to catch any guy. He was landing some shots on Kopylov, but he takes so many shots to the body when people are throwing those open side body kicks. So I think if you're Stolzfus here, you're just trying to spam kicks at Punahele Soriano and hope you don't die on one of these returns. But I think that Punahele Soriano is probably just going to put a right hand through his face at some point and knock him the hell out. He's a very heavy-handed guy. I believe he's working with Extreme Couture, one of the best gyms in the world. And I just think that Dustin Stolzfus is a very average guy physically. I think that in the wrestling, Puna could probably take him down. So we've seen multiple round 3 losses for Stolzfus. I don't think his cardio is something, that's going to really jump off the page here. So do I want to go lay the huge chalk with Puna? Historically, he hasn't justified it, but I think this is a matchup where the physical disparity is probably going to be huge. And Dustin Stolzfus, this is probably the last time to fade him in the UFC. So yeah, Puna by knockout is probably what's going to happen. And Puna just seems like a guy who should stick around in the UFC a little bit longer and who should have had better results than he has had. Whereas Dustin Stolzfus, if he reran those fights, I think he'd lose again. All right. Clay Guida taking on Joaquim Silva. That is the prelim headliner for some reason. Two guys that are both experienced in the game. And, I think they're trying to do a little bit of a favor to Neto BJJ here, giving him a winnable fight against a guy who is a little bit older in the division. After feeding him to Arman Tsarukyan, I believe that was a short notice fight. He gets TKO'd there in the 3rd round. And Arman Tsarukyan, is a guy that is young. He's fresh. He's dangerous. And so that was not a great matchup for him. But we saw that Joaquim Silva beat up on Jesse Ronson. If you guys watch Submission Grappling, you guys saw that Neil Magny went out there and got absolutely wrapped up and submitted easily by Joaquim Silva in a Fury grappling event that I was watching. So I think that people maybe don't understand Neto BJJ can get down even with welterweights on the mat. But his chin is a little bit of a problem historically, right? Arman Tsarukyan gets the TKO win. Ricky Glenn TKOs him in the 1st round. I mean, Ricky Glenn really doesn't knock a lot of people out. Nasrat Hakparas does have some power in that overhand left. That's his one big shot. So, okay, fair play. He got taken out there. He got submitted by Glyco Franca back in the day in 2015. But really, he's a guy that's hard to put away in the grappling. You got to take him out on the feet. So I think that when I'm looking at a fight like this, Clay Guida is a guy that's definitely improved his wrestling and grappling over time, but got submitted by Chase Hooper in a grappling event from the same organization, Fury Pro. He got out wrestled, out grappled, and beat up a little bit by Rafa Garcia, if my memory serves. I know for sure that he got submitted by Claudio Puelles, who's kind of a one-trick pony in the grappling with that knee bar, and didn't submit Jordan Levitt, who's submittable. So when you look and you see that Clay Guida's got 11 losses by sub coming into this fight, that does concern me a little bit, right? Neto BJJ only has 3 wins by sub on his professional grappling record, or excuse me, on his professional mixed martial arts record. But I'm telling you guys, in the actual grappling, he's got a nasty front headlock. He has a nasty guillotine choke. And if Clay Guida shoots one of those ridiculous takedowns that he sometimes shoots from way too far away and lands on his knees, he is going to get submitted with a guillotine, which we've seen a number of times, that specific maneuver catch Clay. So if you look, it's been a while. He's done a good job recently protecting it, but even against Jim Miller in 2019, got submitted there via guillotine choke in the very first round. In a grappling event, got submitted via armbar against Gregor Gracie. There's absolutely no shame in that. But again, got submitted in a grappling event via calf slicer against Chase Hooper. Got submitted against Charles Oliveira via guillotine in the first round. Got submitted via guillotine against Thiago Tavares in the first round. Got TKO'd by Brian Ortega. Got submitted by Dennis Bermudez, the pride of Section 9, baby. Stand up. Section 9 in the building. Dennis Bermudez, Saugerties, New York. You guys know he stands up and he represents and he gets the sub. So Dennis Bermudez was able to submit this man back in the day. We've seen improvements from Clay, but he's 41 years of age. And it just seems to me like Neto BJJ has more paths to victory here. Clay Guida tends to rely on those decisions to get it done. Looking at his career in the UFC, he is 18-17 in the UFC in his career with 11 wins by decision, 5 wins by submission, and 2 wins by TKO. So not a guy who's getting a lot of his wins inside the distance is Clay Guida. He relies on that cardio and that, long-term durability. I think they're doing a favor to Neto BJJ and giving him a fight that he can win and potentially even finish as Clay Guida winds down his lengthy career. But in any case, we move to the next fight here where Miesha Tate is taking on Julia Avila. And this is a fascinating fight, because Miesha Tate has been a very fade-worthy candidate for me lately. She's 37 years of age. She comes back to the UFC and she beats Marion Renault, who retired basically subsequent to the bout. And since then, I mean, what is there really to say? She loses to Ketlin Vieira. A lot of people made an uproar about that, made a stink. I thought she cleanly lost that fight. I bet against her. So maybe that's why I thought that. But then she goes out there, she loses against Lauren Murphy. If y'all watch that Beatriz Mesquita, grappling match on UFC Fight Pass, again, I don't expect you guys to all watch those. I know I'm a grappling nerd, but she got absolutely bullied for portions of that fight. So I think that when we're looking at Miesha Tate, she is a good fighter, but she's a girl who's really longer in the tooth at this point. And Julia Avila is 35 years of age, right? So no spring chicken. I think that it's good matchmaking in that regard. But what do I always talk about? There's old in years, and then there's old in fight years. So we've got somebody who's around 2 years younger in Julia Avila, but she's got a lot fewer fights here. So maybe not as much experience, but I believe she is training in fighting out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So close to a home fight for her over here in Texas. She does have a win in her last fight against Julija Stoliarenko. Huge red flag to me that's popping up, though, is all these cancellations. Oh, my Lord. This girl has more cancellations than anybody I've ever seen, I think. Gato injury. Let me look. Let me see if it's Avila's fault or not. Hosa injury. Event canceled due to coronavirus. Okay, twice that happened to her. Carol Hosa withdrew from the fight 1,000,000 times. Oh my God. Nico Montano tested positive for everything under the sun. I'm kidding. It was COVID. Montano withdrew. Stoliarenko weight cut. Avila knee injury. Oh, wow. Guys, I'm glad I read through all of those, because if I had just read through the first half of them, I would have been like, man, none of these are even her fault. But the most recent one says Julia Avila knee injury. So knee injury, definitely want to look into that. Definitely want to make sure I shaved the stash. It's a long story, Rich, that I will tell you off the air, but I will grow back the stash. Don't worry. There's a long year ahead, so we can still grow back the stash in the year to come. But in any case, looking at these results for Julia Avila, as long as her knee is sound, I do think that she's live to win this fight. She's 3-1 in the UFC. The loss to Sijara Eubanks does not look great, but I think that was Sijara Eubanks at 135, where she doesn't have to cut a ton of weight. And I think Sijara Eubanks always made a huge mistake trying to cut a ton of weight throughout her career. Very interesting. Dixon says she had a knee injury and a kid. That's why she was off 2 years. Very interesting. Great note. I always say I got the sharpest chat in the game. So shout out to Dixon for that great note. And Avila got injured after Sajara's first takedown, could not get up. That makes a lot more sense as well for why she didn't look like herself throughout the fight. Shout out to our guy Fresh, says what's good. So I think that we look at a girl like Julia Avila, and her other loss as a professional was a hand injury all the way back in 2018. So this is not a girl that has many losses, but it does seem like maybe injuries are what her struggle has been throughout her career. She has some power. She has some submission chops. Julija Stolyarenko doesn't have great cardio, but what she does have typically is some grappling chops. And Julija got submitted in that spot. Gina Mazzani tends to be a girl that has strong first rounds and decent wrestling and then fades down the stretch. And she got cleaned up in the first round in that fight against Julia Avila. So I think that Julia Avila, could present some problems. But let's take a look here at what the odds are on this fight, because I could not imagine laying chalk on a fight like this. Somebody pointed out 2 older women. Yeah, and Miesha Tate is coming in here at the plus 136 underdog, but I would need over 2-1 to play Miesha Tate here. I don't think that this is a great fight. I think there's a lot of inherent volatility in this fight. And I think that Miesha Tate, she's been more active, but I just haven't liked what I've seen from her. I think she's trying to do all the right things, but losing to Lauren Murphy doesn't tell me that you're like making huge steps forward in your career necessarily, right? And she pulled out of a scheduled bout with Mayra Buena Silva for an injury. So I think that that's going to be, I got to listen to both of their interviews, but I'm just saying not one of these women inspires confidence for me. And Miesha Tate, despite being a former UFC champion, is 6-6 in the promotion. So she's clinging to that 500 record here, and I think they're trying to find her a winnable fight. In this older woman coming back off a return, but Julia Avila, does have some skills. So not rushing to bet on either one of those women. Next up, speaking of not rushing to bet on, Cody Brundage is back in the building, 9-5, taking on Zach Reese in his UFC debut. Zach Reese coming off of a win on Dana White's Contender Series over Eli Aronov via armbar in the first round. I think he got taken down and then found that armbar off his back. Just Win says Tate should be minus 200 in this fight. Shout out. If Tate didn't have name value, she'd probably be plus 200. I feel you, dog. I feel you. I'm just going to lay off that fight until I do some more research. But admittedly, I think that the idea of laying minus 155 with Julia Avila off of a knee injury and a child is not something I would ever do. But we're looking here at a guy who doesn't have that much experience on the Zach Reese side, has a loss to Kevin Holland all the way back in 2012. So he's been around and he's probably been in training, but in terms of actual competitions, he fought 3 times in the amateurs, it looks like to me, since that Kevin Holland fight. And then he's had 6 fights as a pro since 2021. So he's been very active in that regard, 2 fights a year plus. But we're looking at Cody Brundage, who's coming off the win via disqualification against Jacob Malkoun. He got decision by Cedric Dumas, taken down multiple times. Dumas now has 2 wins by decision in a row in the UFC based on his last 2 fights. And the Rodolfo Vieira fight, I mean, Rodolfo almost got knocked out in that fight. And I did think that was kind of impressive from Cody, but you also see Cody being a bonehead and just dropping the ball once again. I think that Cody has good power in his hands, but not a lot else to write home about. And when I'm looking at a guy like Oh my goodness, sorry about that, folks. Just had to sneeze. But in any case, when I'm looking at a guy like Cody, his cardio hasn't really checked out. His striking has been power based, and when he lands with the power, it tends to go well, but he just doesn't have the volume typically to extend these guys over 15 minutes. So I think that overall, Brundage has a very limited skill set. I think that Cody round one is a way to play him. I think Cody money line, if it's super wide in fights, is a way to play him. But I just don't know that he's got a really UFC level skill set. The difference is though, he's 3-4 in the UFC. He did knock out Tresean Gore, who I think is a UFC level guy. He submitted Dolce Lungi and Bula in a fight that he was getting owned, I thought. But Zach Reese, like, what has he proven exactly? I mean, beating Eli Aronoff, another guy who didn't have many fights under his belt, who's not a very proven guy. Tommy Britton, negative record. Aaron Phillips, nothing to write home about. So again, I'm just not seeing the result that tells me Zach Reese is there. He's training at a War Training Center in Texas. So this is a local Texas guy. They're trying to get him on the card. They're trying to get him a win for sure. But he was getting taken down in his last fight against Aronoff, if my memory serves. And, if that's the case, then I don't think it's unreasonable to think Brundage could potentially take him down or potentially knock him out as well. So I do expect that, Zach Reese should win this fight. Let me go take a look at what the odds are. Yeah, Zach Reese about a minus 210 favorite. That's probably a touch wide to me, but I also think it's not worth the risk. So I'm not betting on Cody Brundage unless it's well over 2-1. It would need to be probably over 3-1 to bet on Cody Brundage based on the cardio and everything I've seen. But I also just think Zach Reese a little bit unproven. No wins by decision. All of his wins are in the first round. When has that ever gone wrong? We've seen that before. So technically speaking, Cody, all of his wins in the UFC are in the first round, but he fought Nick Maximov to a somewhat competitive decision. He fought Cedric Dumas to a somewhat competitive decision. So I just think that there's a lot that we still don't know, but losing to William Knight is an unforgivable offense for me. So I'm going to pick Zach Reese here. Next up, folks, let's take a look at what we've got. All right. We've got Joe Solecki taking on Drakkar Klose. This is an interesting fight. Drakkar Klose kind of had his career derailed for a while by an incident with Jeremy Stephens, got pushed and messed up his head or his neck or something, which is always scary, when you're talking about a professional fighter and the shove at the weigh-in is giving him like whiplash and stuff. It's not to say anything negative about Drakkar Klose. It was a completely boneheaded thing to do by Jeremy Stephens, but just to say in subsequent bouts makes it really hard to, just have confidence, in Drakkar necessarily moving forward. Just Win says Cody that mentally weak. He makes Alexander Hernandez look stable. I feel, dog. I think Zachary Reese in the confidence department is minus 1,000. But I also thought the same thing against Tresean Gore, and then all of a sudden one random right hand and he's asleep. Danny P says holding my nose and betting Cody plus 200. Shout out to my guy Uncle Weezy in the building, one of the greats. Happy Monday to you, Liam. Let's get it this week. Absolutely, brother. Nothing better. So we've got Klose here, who's looking for a third straight win in the UFC. He beat Brandon Jenkins and Rafa Garcia, and I think the Rafa Garcia win certainly a feather in his cap, right? Rafa Garcia has had a pretty decent run through the UFC. And Drakkar Klose has had a good run through the UFC. 7-2 overall in the promotion. Got to the UFC all the way back in 2017. Win over Devin Powell. Did not last with the organization. Beat Mark Diakese via split decision. Mark Diakese's still around. Lost to David Tamer, who has disappeared off the face of the map. I don't know where the Tamer brothers are. Lando Venata gets the win there. Gets the win over Bobby Green. Impressive win. To have on your resume as a young fighter on the come up. Christos Yagos gets the win there via unanimous decision. If he could finish the fight, he would have a much better promotional push behind him. But then you look at what's held him back. That loss against Beneil Dariush, went out there, put it on the line, looked like he had him beat, got overconfident, and then ends up on the wrong end of a meme-ish knockout, and it set his career back a little bit. You look, Jai Herbert withdrew from a scheduled bout that they were supposed to have in 2021. Then Klose cornerman, test positive for COVID during a scheduled bout with Luis Pena. Then Jeremy Stephens pushes him. So my man does not fight from 2020 to 2022. Then he fights Brandon Jenkins. He gets back on track, beats Alpha Garcia, and that kind of proved he was back for real. So now the Diego Ferreira fight that he has scheduled, Ferreira pulls out with an injury in 2022. Later that year, close ACL injury. So ACL injury, coming back from that seems like a lot. He's a guy who's 35 years of age, going on to 36, closer to 36 than he is 35, and he's coming off an ACL repair. So I want to see what Drakkar Klose looks like on his training footage. I want to see what he looks and feels and sounds like in the lead up, because that's a lot to overcome. And you look at a guy like Joe Solecki on the other side, they call him Joe Gracie in some circles, right? Training at a Gym O. This is a guy who's got 8 professional wins via submission. Last time out, submits Carl Deaton via submission in the second round. Beat Alex de Silva, and also submitted Donald Cerrone in the Fury Pro grappling match scene. He lost a split decision to Jerry Gordon. I bet on Jerry Gordon on the money line there. I bet on Jerry Gordon by split decision, not by split decision, by decision in that spot as well. And I thought that was a great spot. Jerry Gordon, the king of the decision. And on the other side, you've got a guy in Joe Solecki whose cardio and his decision-making sometimes in the grappling will leave a little bit to be desired against somebody like Jared, who's a guy who's willing to stay on top, chip away with ground and pound. And when you look at a guy like Solecki, he's great on the mat. He's got excellent skills, but his cardio hasn't always checked out, and his striking hasn't always checked out. So you look, he has the win over Austin Hubbard in the first round via rear naked choke. He looked like $1 million in that fight. When he wins via a sub in round 1, he looks like $1 million. But then you look at the losses. Nicholas Mota TKOs him in round 3. Jerry Gordon split decision, beats him in the second and third round. Even you go back and look, the Jim Miller fight, he wins a unanimous decision, but it looked a little bit sketchy at points in that fight. So shout out to the Jewish Better. My guy says, Joe Biden lock. You mean if he gets too close? You can't let him get close. I'm from the self-defense school of Chael Sonnen, my brother. I can't get it in frame here now. Bang. The Chael Sonnen VIP pass to enlightenment. You can't let him get close. It's the old Vanderlei Silva line. And shout out to Uncle Weezy. Says, love Solecki's back takes. If Klose gets too aggressive and pressures too much on the feet, I see Joe getting him down and getting his back. I think that that's very possible as well, my man. I think he's one of the better back takers at 155 pounds. I think that on the feet, though, Klose definitely has the better skill. So well-matched fight here. Shout out to Joe Midas, says Solecki all day, but scary. If he gasses or gets caught on the feet, it could be trouble. Absolutely agree with you there. Dixon says, to be honest, I feel like Klose is not far behind Courtney Casey being cut from the promotion. Respectfully, they both as mid as it gets. Hey, fair play, my man. I think that Joe has a path to winning here by decision if he can get those back takes going. And I think he also has a path to winning here via the sub. I think he's a very good grappler. So those are the paths I see for him. For Drakkar, I think he's got to win this by knockout, or he's got to grind out a decision, win the second and third rounds, not give up any bad positions in the back takes. And I agree. This is the big red flag is the close ACL surgery at 35. It's hard to bounce back from that. And he's dealing with the fact that he's coming back from this layoff as well. So a guy who should match up with him well in terms of size, youth, durability, potentially. Joe Solecki here is my pick. Next up, guys, we've got Steve Garcia, the Mean Machine. Is that it? Yep. Taking on Melk Costa. And Melk Costa does fit one criteria for me right off the bat, guys, which is a younger fighter with more experience, 26 professional bouts for the 27-year-old here, whereas Steve Garcia has 19 bouts as a 31-year-old, halfway to 32 years old. However, you look at the quality of competition on the Steve Garcia side, and he went out there and knocked out Chase Hooper in the first round like it was nobody's business, dropped him, standing back up, dropped him, standing back up, dropped him, standing back up, dropped him. You look at the Shylin Nerd and Becky fight. gets the finish there with just relentless boxing pressure, landing the big shots, doing the job, right? Going out there against Charlie Ontiveros, nearly gets killed, right? He gets hurt so bad in that fight, just finds a way to get on top of him and beat him up. So Steve Garcia is a violent man. And when he gets his way, he really hurts people. But he's also been on the wrong end of a highlight reel knockout for Mahashate, right? So Steve Garcia puts it all on the line. He likes to go out there and scrap. I think that he has very good power, and I think that that's something that's translating throughout his career. 11 wins by knockout, just one loss by knockout, and that was against Mahashate, a young kid with big power. You look at Mahashate, had a little bit less on the reach department, but he was 8 years younger than Steve Garcia, and Steve was trading bombs with him in the pocket, and then got banged out of there. So I think that Steve is a guy that can take out a lot of fighters, but he can also get clipped. And he was favored to win that one. He got clipped in that spot, but he's a good fighter. Says he's training out of Jackson Wink MMA. Now, Mel Costa on the other side here is a bit more well-rounded, right? 7 wins by knockout, 6 wins by submission, 7 wins by decision. So a very balanced approach to the game. Last time out, got the decision win against Austin Lingo. Not really an inspiring performance, I didn't feel, in the sense that he clearly won it. But we've seen Nate Landwehr go out there and just gas out a guy like Lingo and get the finish. And, I would have liked to see that from Mel Costa if he was going to take a big step up. Even on the regionals, back in the amateur days, Austin Lingo had been finished. And he wasn't able to accomplish that. Thiago Moises was able to, weather an early storm and then get on his back and submit him. Furio says Mel Costa is going to do bad things to Steve. Fair play, brother. I need to look into the question from my guy Dixon, who says, does Steve have a high school or college wrestling background at all? That's a great question. Steve Garcia, UFC. I will check. Because I would think that he probably does, but I don't know for sure. Of course, his UFC bio doesn't immediately come up. Let me check his Wikipedia page. He started training at Greg Jackson's satellite gym at the age of 15. He went on to train jiu-jitsu and kickboxing at Luttrell's MMA before moving to Jackson Wink MMA. So I will see if there's any additional information on his UFC bio, but it seems like he definitely has been training from a young age, but maybe not in wrestling as a specific discipline. But in any case, he seems to match up well in terms of the intangibles. He's got the height advantage here, and the reach is going to be at parity. And Mel Costa, I would think, is used to being the much bigger fighter. Last time out against Austin Lingo, he had a 3-inch reach advantage, despite being the same height as Lingo. So now he's going to be at reach parity. He's going to be a little bit smaller than his opponent. And, we've seen that, his grappling is very good, but he can give up bad positions in his own right. So should be a great scrap. And I think that from a durability standpoint, you got to give a slight lean to Mel Costa here because he's the younger guy. And he also has never been knocked out in the same, brutal way that Steve Garcia was. But I think that it should be a fun, honest scrap. So taking a peek at the line, if Mel Costa hit minus 300, minus 350, maybe then I would look to get in front of it. But right now, I don't feel the need to bet on Steve Garcia because I do think he plays into the volatility a little bit. Coming off some knockout wins, he could go out there and take a lot more risks. And you just don't want to be on there when Steve Garcia is dealing. So I'm almost leaning towards the fight not to go here as a spot because I just think both these guys embrace the risk. But not finishing Austin Lingo is like, is it a trap? So I'll have to investigate further before I fire any units at that fight. In any case, we've got an interesting scrap next. A light heavyweight bout between Reese and Dana White Contender Series winner Adolfo Bellato Trator taking on Ihor the Duelist Poteria. And Poteria is coming off of a knockout loss to Carlos Ulberg. He also was TKO'd by Nikolai Negomerianu. His only win in the UFC so far has been a victory over Mauricio Shogun Hua via TKO in the first round. Shogun, long since washed, unfortunately. Great fighter, legend of the game. Now you look at the Lucas Soldowski side, and he has a KO1 win in that fight as well. This is a guy who tends to get his wins via KO1, has 4 wins by decision, but none of them at a very high level. And we've seen in the UFC level, whether he got off of drugs, whether he, has just been exposed as not having the game to go against really good guys. He's just been getting really tired in his fights very quickly. And I think that that's a big problem. Adolfo Bellato last time out showed great pressure against Taha. Taha was a heavily favored individual. And what he had done in that spot was he went out there and he weathered the storm. He took some shots, but he kept coming forward. He kept pressing. And this guy's only losses are to Vitor Petrino. This guy who's a surging force in the division. He fought him, got TKO'd in the first round. He won the rematch. He did it on Contender Series. Didn't go his way, but he made it an honest fight. He dropped Vitor Petrino in that spot. So I think of this as a very, talented, sound fighter. And is he perfect? No. He's had moments of sketchiness in the past, but he has a win over Acacio dos Santos, another Contender Series guy, via unanimous decision, beat him up in that spot, controlled the fight. He beat Taha, again, heavily favored prospect. A lot of people were really excited about what he was going to be able to do in that spot. And then you're looking at, a guy that he's lost to guys in Vitor Petrino that is very credible. On the other side, Carlos Ulberg is a credible loss, but Nikolai Negumereanu is kind of just like a workman-like light heavyweight. He's the guy who goes out there, swings leather. He's got a little bit of a decent cardio game, but he's nothing so special in my view. And he was able to go out there and TKO this man. So I think that, this is an interesting fight. I don't think that Adolfo Bellato is a lock by any means. These are two 27-year-olds that could both get knocked out in the first round. It's a light heavyweight fight. That invites some inherent volatility. But I think the longer the fight goes, the more it favors Bellato. I would almost want to look for a live line on Bellato if he got dropped or something like that, because I think he could work his way back into the fight. I think he has the ability to work on the ground, to get takedowns, to potentially mix up the phases of the fight. And I think that he just has a pretty diligent approach. I think that he's a guy who's rounded out his skill set. And despite the fact that he's an individual that can get cracked on the chin, I think that he's got actual skills that could win him more UFC fights than Ihor Potieria. So I think he's going to get the job done here. But it's a UFC debut spot. Debut jitters are a real thing. And we've seen this man knocked out before. So I would not be laying, these massive chalk prices. I would almost look for an ITD or a live entry probably. Noah Allen says, I'll raise you Steve Garcia losing to Ricky Turquoise and Akon Cruz. I think that those were back at 135 pounds as well, which I don't think he had any business cutting all the way down there, given the fact he's the same size as Mel Costa. But fair play, my brother. That does make sense. Mike Harvey says, what's up, Liam? Shout out for you, Mike. Thanks for being here. Any crazy takes that I've missed? I don't think anything crazy yet, but it's always the research that reveals something crazy to me. I feel like a lot of times on my gut impression, I can understand where the odds makers are coming from, where the public's coming from. But sometimes it's the devil in the details, right? The things that people miss. And that's what I'm definitely going to be looking for. But I definitely picked a handful of underdogs as well. I think I picked Bobby Green as an underdog so far throughout the card. I definitely lean a dog or pass situation in the Bellato pre-fight line, but I think he's going to win the fight. So that's the way the cookie crumbles. In any case, we've got the next fight up. We've got Wellington Turman taking on Jared Gooden. This should be a interesting scrap. Two guys that are probably fighting for their UFC future here. Two guys that have definitely struggled at this level, but they're both on the right side of 30. So technically, they've got enough time to put it together, but both of them have dealt with some similar problems in a way. For Jared Gooden, he has 2 losses via knockout. His chin has typically been very solid, but he did get TKO'd by the very powerful Impa Kasanganay, guy who just got that big win in the PFL as well. He got beat by Carlston Harris and missed weight in that fight. So not a good look in that spot. Coming back at welterweight, is he going to miss weight again? He did miss weight at welterweight for the Randy Brown fight, for the Carlston Harris fight. It's happened a number of times now in the UFC. He's left the organization, came back, missed weight again. So it was probably on short notice against Carlston Harris, but getting another opportunity here. If he loses, he's probably not sticking around. Meanwhile, Wellington Thurman, the guy who's coming off 2 straight losses, lost to Randy Brown, lost to Andre Petroski. And Petroski, before losing to Pereira, was on a great run, bunch of wins in a row, but none of them over a super high level of competition. Randy Brown is a guy that lost to Jack Della Maddalena, got finished in that fight. So they gave him a little bit of that get right spot. He had beaten Trinaldo, Chaos Williams, Jared Gooden, Alex Cowboy Oliveira. So they're both fighting these lower end guys in the division. Wellington Thurman gets the win over Miesha Serkinov, a guy who looked like a shell of himself, cutting down in weight. And then Sam Alvey, via split decision, almost found a way to blow that fight. Had Bruno Silva's back, looked like he was going to finish the fight, falls over the top, gets finished instantly. His chin is terrible. Andrew Sanchez, a guy not known for his power and his knockout ability, was able to take him out on the feet. So I think of a guy like Wellington Thurman as very sketchy. I just think his chin is not very good. And I think the city travel is on the money here. Gooden stepped in on very short notice last time out. The UFC brought him back, right? They didn't need to do that, but they brought him back. They gave him another opportunity. He's been grinding on the regional scene. He's been fighting tough guys, and he's been putting it together. Beating Curtis Millender, that's a good win. Former UFC guy as well. So, the guys he's lost to, Alan Juban, Randy Brown, Abu Bakr Nurmagomedov, Impa Kasanganai, Carlston Harris. I mean, there's nobody to sneeze at in that list. So I think that Jared Gooden could definitely get this job done, and I think he is poised to win this fight by knockout as well. He's got a lot of power in his hands. I would favor him if it's a pure stand-up fight for sure. Next up, we've got the headline on the prelims, guys. The very first fight, the curtain jerker. Thank you to everybody who's made it this far. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. Looks like we got a tight 90 minutes here on the breakdown today. If we keep this one under 10, so I'll try and get you guys in and out in 90 minutes. Thank you guys for spending some time with me today and talking through these fights. But in any case, we've got a great fight to break down. Let's do it. Jamie Lynn Horth taking on Veronica Hardy. And a little bit surprising that Jamie Lynn Horth is not in Canada, on the Canadian card. But in any case, she's going to be here in Austin taking on Veronica Hardy, and this should be a hell of a scrap. I'm looking at Tapology. It says this is a dead pick'em. That's what it looks like on my odds board as well. So we've got a very interesting scrap. Last time out, Jamie Lynn Horth cashed me a ticket. I bet on her against Haley Cowan. I thought that was a very winnable fight for her. And I thought she almost made it a little bit harder than it needed to be. But she got the win. She got the job done. Now she's back. She's in this first fight, and Veronica Hardy definitely surprised people last time out, beating Juliana Miller. But I think it also has spoken to, some of the flaws in Juliana Miller. She lost to Luana Santos in her subsequent bout via knockout in the first round. So I don't know that she's necessarily UFC level, right? We definitely have a lot more we need to see from Juliana Miller to know that. She's 1-2 in the promotion so far. And prior to that, the loss to Bea Malecki, she looked like a completely different fighter, granted, but Bea Malecki is half the fighter, of somebody like Jamie Lynn Horth or a quarter or something, So I just think that Juliana Miller was a susceptible opponent, and Veronica Hardy got the win there, got the job done, but she didn't finish that fight. And I thought that that's, maybe a sign of where she's at still. I think Jamie Lynn Horth would have finished that fight. But also I thought she would have finished Haley Cowan. So that was a surprise to me. But you look, she has wins on the regional scene in the amateurs over Lupita Godinez via split decision and unanimous decision. So that proves she can go with girls that are physically strong. Haley Cowan, same thing, physically strong, big, a powerful enough girl. She was able to muscle her around at points. And she was able to out-sophisticate her as well. She's an aggressive girl. She's very violent. That's what I liked about betting on her. She looks like she really wants to get in there and fight, and she's not afraid of somebody bringing it back to her. the UFC, I believe, has like cut ties with Dan Hardy, right? And I think that they would probably be more than happy to see, Jamie Lynn Horth beat her up. But the thing that gives me pause is just like, then why didn't they put this in Canada? That was the only thing that I didn't understand. But shout out to my guy Moyes here. Says Turman Mush of the Year, and he says Horth KO lock. I hear where you're at there, but I would almost lean with the ITD, brother, just because she does have so many wins by submission as well. But what I liked about Horth in her last fight was Horth has more dog in her. And this is direct from my write-up that I did for that fight. Haley Cowan, high-level athlete, but doesn't react well to strikes. And when you look at Jamie Lynn Horth, finished prior to the UFC debut, all 5 of her professional victories, defeated the number 2 ranked pound-for-pound women's fighter in Canada to be the number 1 ranked pound-for-pound women's fighter in Canada. So I think that this is a girl that was historically, underrated coming into the UFC. I thought that the Haley Cowan win was forewritten, and now she's dealing with Veronica Hardy here in what should be a, winnable sophomore outing. So I think that this is going to be Jamie Lynn Horth's opportunity. I think she's going to get the job done here inside the distance, but I'm not sure, if it's going to be a KO or a submission. I'm going to look into this fight a little bit more, but I do think that Veronica Hardy made a radical transformation from her earlier bouts to her more recent bouts. So I want to give, my hats off to her for making those drastic improvements. But I think, I think that city travel is on the money there. I won't bring up the drama and the bullshit there because, I don't want to drag people's dirty laundry or whatever, but I feel you, man. I think that does speak to where the UFC's at with this. And I think that when you look, Veronica Hardy is a girl who has a 2-4 record overall in the promotion. So it's not like she has, ever blown people's hair back, but they have, a contract with her. They got to give her the fights. But I think that they're going to try and strategically make it difficult, if winnable opportunities. And I think this is a very difficult one for her. I think that Jamie Lynn Horth is a very aggressive and competent fighter. So not an easy matchup for anybody. Squamish, stand up. And with that being said, guys, that's it. There you have it. The UFC Austin first look is in the books. I appreciate each and every one of you guys very much for being here. Thank you all so much for making the time. If you guys are catching this live, then drop a like on the video on your way out. If you guys are watching this on the replay, then make sure you show some love. If you want more people to watch the show, if you want us to do more with this channel, more content, then just share the show with more people. Helps us grow. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for the support. Means the world. If you're looking for an audio version of this show, you can find it easily on podcast. Just search for Liam Picks Fights. You'll find all the content that I do long form on this channel is on there on audio. No ads, no bullshit. So if you're looking for a way to take in the content, that's an easy way to do it. If you're looking for an easy way to support, drop 5-star review on those podcast platforms. Again, helps other people find the show. But thank you guys so much. Make sure you subscribe as well on the way out. Hit the bell for notifications. You guys know with the times I'm a little bit finicky, but I do my very best to bring you guys as much great content as possible each week. So stay tuned for timestamps. Stay tuned for the clips. They're all coming as soon as possible. Thank you all for the continued support. Let's make some money this week at UFC Austin. Let's get some great fights under our belt. God bless each and every one of you guys, and come back next time. We're having all the same fun again. See you on Thursday. Thanks, guys.